My name is Mary, but you could have guessed that. You're either seated beside or behind or in front of Mary. You can't go to the well for water or to the market without passing Mary, Mary, and the other Mary. Our poor fathers, so weary of waiting for God to deliver them from Pax Romana oppression, they named us bitter to show God their life was bitter. Oh, they awaited each new birth in the hopes of a male child who would bring the Messiah to deliver them. And then, when they found themselves stuck instead with weakling girls, they named us Mary to show God their life was bitter. Mary, 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 bitter, bitter, bitter. Some families have more than one Mary. Mary the eldest, Mary the middle, Mary the younger. Life's bitter, life's still bitter, life's very, very bitter. How wonderful that God chose one sweet Mary from among us to answer the cries of his people for freedom. And Mary would bear far more than someone who would remove the Roman oppression, because her son would take away all oppression. When I met Jesus, he said my name in a way that was special only to me. Oh, he was surrounded by Marys, but he called each of us in our own way. You see, I'm from Magdala. My name is Mary the Magdalene. Mary also means tall watchtower. He said my name, Mary Magdalene, in a way that made me want to sit straighter and stand taller, always keeping watch in his presence. He was more concerned with who we were and what we would become than what we had been. I followed with him, and I'm a witness to his life, his death, his burial, and his resurrection. And I want to tell you the most spectacular story that has ever happened. Every story of his sufficiency begins with the telling of our own insufficiency. You see, we cannot tell how much we need him until we understand how truly lost we are without him. Have you ever found yourself lost in a sea of trouble? Too far from shore to swim? You went wading into waters that you knew might get you into trouble without understanding how deep the troubled rivers really ran. You see, you thought that you could just dip your foot in without suffering the consequence of those who plunged in headlong. And it wasn't the danger you wanted, just the thrill of being near it, the thrill of defying God's wisdom to avoid it altogether and getting away with it. But then the bottom dropped out from beneath you, and you found yourself further and further from the safety of shore until the waters covered your eyes, ears, nose in blackness, shutting out all light. Sin. It always starts with that first proud step of disobedience. You see, my own trouble began with a decision that I made in my youth, and it robbed me of many adult years. You see, I knew God's warning against the accursed strength of idols and how he commanded them to be smashed to dust. And while I never would have bought one for myself, well, this woman, her husband bought salted and smoked fish from my father's processing warehouse, and she gave her to me. She said Ashar reminded her of me. Well, Ashar was the goddess of womanhood and beauty, and so I kept her. It seemed ungrateful to smash such a beautiful gift. Well, I didn't keep her so I could worship her. I just esteemed her too much to cast her away. And in time, my secret possession began to secretly possess me. I began to hear her voice in my head. You know, at first humoring and kind of tempting. But then she started taunting and arguing. Her voice grew louder and louder, and I couldn't ask for help because I knew that what I did was wrong. I brought this on myself. I touched what was forbidden. I thought maybe if I just ignored her and tried to pretend she wasn't there, that soon she would tire of me as the beauty of my youth faded. But she began to call out to other spirits to come in with her. There was less and less room in my body to operate my own spirit. Balaam made me want to hoard my wealth in a greedy pile and lunge out at anybody who wanted to separate me from my wealth. And Jezbeth crafted so many lies for me to tell I could seldom remember the truth. And Varen was always impatient with me, and she made me anxious, nauseous, and scared. And Astaris shamed me for all I was, and all I was not, and all I never would be. And Abaddon the Destroyer came with nightmares and day visions of insects swarming in hordes to eat away my flesh. And this seventh demon had no name. Came in my own voice, saying, "Cut yourself. Let out the pain. Cut yourself. Atone for what you've done. Cut yourself." My parents sent for healers, priests, and rabbis, but no one could force the demons to leave. And I knew that only God could save me. But he was choosing not to because he was punishing me for what I did. I touched what was forbidden. I disrespected God. Like Eve in the Garden of Eden, I was cut off. My parents, they sent sacrifices to the temple on my behalf. Was there not one of those lambs pure enough to pay for my sin and let me start clean again? Mercy! Mercy! My God! My God! Why have you forsaken me? Colors drained from my vision, and everything was just dark and gray. And when I did eat, food tasted like clay. And the demons, they argued ever louder that my life was not worth living, not worth living, not worth living, not worth living, not worth cut yourself, not worth living, cut yourself, not worth living, cut yourself. And they were right, because life lived under the control of darkness is not a life. It's just a withering away to the dust from which we came. One day, two of my caregivers were talking about Jesus, and the very mention of his name, it caused the demons to shudder and then lunge out in guttural violence. Oh, I knew he had something of power. They didn't want me to see him, and I begged to be taken to him. But I remember very little of the journey. I've been told of kicking and clawing and scratching and being chained down on the litter. But they took away my sight and my sound. By the time I arrived at his feet, I had gone deaf and dumb. I couldn't see or hear anything when they unchained me and dropped me at his feet. But there was light coming from him, from his feet, from his hands, his face. Oh, his eyes. They were like brilliant torch lamps just shining down past my bruised and broken body into my poor sin-infested soul with love. I felt love, pure as spring water gushing from him, as he reached out to touch me, and he said my name, Mary. And they were gone. They were gone. This man had done what I thought only God could do. Save me. I didn't know who he was or where he came from. I only knew that from this moment on, every bite of food I tasted, every song I sang in freedom, every lamb I touched, everything was from him. I could find no words to thank him. What would I say? Because from this moment on, I was free. I was free to walk in a newness of light. I was free. And every moment from now on, I owed to him. I only knew that I would follow him wherever he led me. Whatever life I had from this moment on, I gave him. Both those who were called and those who were cured. I studied his face each morning for the light to renew me with the hope of another day free from darkness. I was hungry for the first time in many months, and I hungered for more than food. I hungered for the righteousness in him that chased away my captors. I thirsted for the truth that chased away the lies. And the days with him were like nothing I'd ever known. You see, where Ashara nagged me into submission, well, my Lord, he spoke only truth, and he let my yearning for something more constant than myself triumph over my will. Balaam made me want to hoard my wealth, but serving the needs of others with Christ gave me ample opportunity just to lay it all down and experience the joy that comes from serving others. Jezbeth confounded me with a tangle of lies, but the master, he was just a master of truth. Varen, she made me always jump with her impatient demands. But Jesus, he took time for children and lepers and the aged and the soul-wrecked sinners like me. He was never impatient with any of us. Astareth made me sorry I was ever born with her constant shaming. But my friend, he let me see the gifts and the beauties created in me, and for the first time I lived a life that I knew was worthy of the calling of God. Abaddon destroyed my peace with nightmares and day visions, but the Prince of Peace, he cast a vision of heaven so detailed that I know he came from a place of perfect rest. And I longed someday to go there with him. The seventh demon, who came in my own voice, saying, "Cut yourself. Let out the pain, cut yourself. Atone for what you've done." My Savior, he walked through everything with me. He never asked me to do anything that was too difficult that he wasn't right there to do with me. And anything I couldn't do alone, he did with me and for me. The demons held me as a prisoner against my will. But with Jesus, I just surrendered, for there was no place that I would rather be. And he told us many times that he would die and that he would be resurrected. But we couldn't understand that. We couldn't comprehend it. We couldn't live in the light of that. And so nothing prepared me for the day of that eventual truth. When Peter broken by his own night of trial and denial, to tell us the news that Christ had been arrested and that he was to be crucified, we couldn't comprehend that. I mean, how does this happen? A trial can't happen at night. And the Sanhedrin had brought the charges. They're only supposed to investigate the charges. There's supposed to be 2 witnesses. There were no witnesses. A trial cannot happen on a feast day or on the Sabbath. And the Sanhedrin could not issue the death penalty. It was beyond our comprehension how something so outside the law could have happened, and that they had said he would be crucified that day. John pleaded with Mary not to go to the crucifixion. Crucifixion is too much for any mother's heart. But she had known him as a helpless infant in a wind-blown stable in every remarkable moment since. And no mother of such a child will stay away from him at the moment he needs her most. The other 9 disciples were not present either. When they were in the garden, they broke away. And when the soldiers came out, they ran. Well, they went to Mary, Martha, and Bethany 2 miles away. And then the gates had shut. And how were they to know that when they took Jesus, that they would try him and condemn him to death that same night? How could they have begun to imagine so final a price? And so they were waiting at the home of Mary and Martha for travel to begin again after the Sabbath, to take them news of all we had witnessed. We went with the women and with John. Peter we left weeping in a corner. If he could get up and join us. But he was a broken man. When we met Jesus, his appearance was disfigured beyond that of any man. His form was marred beyond any human likeness. Still, his eyes, they held the light of truth as he looked up and said to us, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. For if men do these things when the tree is green, what will happen when it is dry?" Many who watched the lurid procession broke away to go and fight for places to stand next to the spectacle. This death, the worst a prisoner condemned to die can face, it stirs up all the vile bloodlust and depravity that makes men want to mock the dying and somehow distance themselves from their own eventual death. When they stripped his clothes away, I turned away to save him from the shame of exposure. And then they hoisted up the patibulum to meet the stipe. And they landed together with a heavy clunk. Jerked my head to see the place from where the sound came, just behind his chest. And I will never forget that sound. For that is the sound of love. Love is the sound of 2 beams notching together and reverberating through the heart of our Savior as the tree of life is lifted up. The hideous mockery, lots, and insults, it was too much for me to bear. I felt that same falling feeling I felt when I was first brought to him. I looked into his eyes, and still they held the light of truth. Still they held love. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. This man who could pray for his persecutors even while they were torturing him, because he loved sinners. He loved them into his light, and then he taught them how to walk in his truth. And I became terrified of what would happen when the last of his light faded. How could I ever walk again in the darkness without him? I felt them before I saw their familiar shadows and heard their circling taunt. Satan and his throng of demons come to dance before my dying Lord. The ruler of darkness come to laugh that death would win in the end for all of us. And Baal released his bulls of Bashan to charge up and circle the cross. They were everywhere, pressing towards me. I begged him, "Cast them away! Cast them away!" as he's so mercifully done for me, but he wouldn't do it. He looked at his mother and John and he said, "Woman, behold your son." And then he said to John, "Behold your mother." And the demons just swarmed. The darkness deepened into night, and the earth began to shake and rumble. And I felt like my own life was going to be lost with his. Couldn't breathe. And then he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" No. I know that there is no worse feeling for a soul than to be left alone in this darkness. Was there no mercy in heaven? Mercy! Mercy! "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit," he said. "Oh God, let it be so. Let him rest with you in the peace in which he taught us to live." "It is finished," he said, and his head dropped to his chest, and all the light around him went out. And the world was darker to me than it was before I met him. My Savior, my Master, my Lord, my God, my friend. When they lowered him for us to hold, John took the body and he placed the crown of thorns at the foot of the cross. Why? 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 Without him, I could do nothing. I searched for answers before him. There are none. Why? I longed for the earth just to open up and bury me. Bury me. Bury me. Bury. We had made no preparations for his burial. Everything happened so fast. We made no place for him. He couldn't really end in a common grave with 2 thieves. He must be buried. And then Joseph of Arimathea received permission from Pilate to take the body away, along with Nicodemus. They were members of the Sanhedrin. It was their last chance to honor him with the allegiance that they denied him while he lived. When they lifted Jesus from the arms of his mother, her poor heart, wrought to the extremest pitch of anguish, could stand no more. She collapsed and began to mumble incoherently. John and Salome half led, half carried the stricken Mary through the streets to her temporary home and put her to bed. Mary, the wife of Cleophas, and I followed to see where they were taking the body. They brought 75 pounds of myrrh and aloes. It was enough for a royal burial. But they insisted on doing the work themselves, even though it was women's work. And with the darkness coming and the Sabbath approaching, they wouldn't be allowed to touch him at dark. And so they lurched his body forward and backward, side to side, and they left his bruised and bloodied flesh unsoothed by water. They didn't love him enough, or have time enough, to give him the care and attention of which he is worthy. And when they placed him in the tomb, I wanted to crawl in there with him. I didn't know where else to go. But the heavy rock was rolled into place, and we were starting the Sabbath, the holy Sabbath. But all I knew to be holy was gone. All night we waited. We waited near Mary, and she just tossed and turned in her fitful sleep and mumbled incoherently. None of us could look into the eyes of the others, for we knew there was only emptiness there. We just huddled on mats and played the scenes repeating over and over again. There was nothing to do but wait. Wait for the Sabbath to be over and take word to the disciples of all that had happened. Wait for them to come into town too late to see the body of the Lord. At the close of the Sabbath, Mary, the wife of Cleophas, and I, we met with Joanna. We didn't know what to do. All we knew is that we wanted to get our own spices. We wanted to anoint him with our own love. We wanted to wash him clean with water. And so at the eve of the Sabbath, we went and collected the spices. And in the break of day, we headed back to the tomb. Mary, the wife of Cleophas, got the Ethiopian myrrh. Salome had some galbanum, and Joanna got some oil and a salve from India, and I carried the water. Well, we left at the first break of daylight so that we wouldn't be caught trespassing at the sepulchre. It was the only thing we could think to do, to go be near the body that housed the spirit we didn't know how to live without. But when we got to the tomb, we saw that the rock had already been pried aside. Well, I started screaming. Now, I don't know what you would do if you came with swollen eyes from crying all night in the half light of morning to see an empty tomb, but I screamed like only a woman startled out of her mind would scream. I ran all the way back to the disciples, screaming, come to the tomb, come to the tomb, they take the body of the Lord out of the tomb, and I don't know where they put him. I said it again a little bit slower because they couldn't understand. They've taken the body of the Lord out of the tomb, and I don't know where they put him. Once again for the men, taken the body of the Lord out of the tomb, and I don't know where they put him. And so they came back with us all the way to the garden. But when we got there, they looked in and said, there is no body. I know. That's what I told you. They've taken the body of the Lord out of the tomb, and I don't know where they put him. And so the men left. Well, the women had already left too. Raising those sons, James, John, and Joseph, must have prepared those two women for any terror. But I had nowhere to go. I just wanted to be near him, but he was gone. And when I looked into the tomb, there were two angels seated there. With their wings spread forward, they formed the mercy seat. But I was too blind by grief to see it right there in front of me. And one of the angels said, woman, why are you crying? They've taken the body of my Lord out of the tomb, and I don't know where they put him. Then another figure came into the garden, and he said, woman, why is it you're crying? They've taken the body of my Lord out of the tomb, and I don't know where he put him. Sir, if you have taken him, get him, and I will take him. Mary. Rabboni! His hands came up to catch mine and take them away. He said, do not touch me, for I have not yet returned to my Father and your Father. My God, your God. You see, he wasn't mine to touch. He wasn't from this world. He was returning to his Father, as he always told us he would. For he was the Son of God. This garden held an empty tomb. And that empty tomb was proof that the tree of life could not be killed. And there it stood before me, hands and feet still pierced from where it crossed, ready to share with me life everlasting. You see, Christ saved me from earthly torments when he cast the demons out. But I was still too imperfect to fellowship with my Creator. I was still a sinner. But now, through the perfect lamb offering, the lamb that was finally enough, I was free to walk with my God in the Garden of Eden, as Adam and Eve did, before the blackness of sin separated them. Holy, 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 holy God. Eventually, I got up from the garden. Well, I didn't want to miss what might happen next. He told me, my peace I give you. As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you. Go into all the world and preach the Bible and the gospel. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. Whoever does not believe will be condemned. Therefore, go into all the world and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, And lo, I am with you always, into the very end of the age. And then, when he ascended into heaven 40 days later, I didn't weep for him, because this time I know that he's coming back. You see, he told us so many times before he was crucified that he would die and rise again, but we didn't understand it. We couldn't comprehend it. We couldn't live in the light of that truth. But now, he said, I am going to prepare a place for you, and then I'm coming back. And I know he's coming back because he's never lied to me, because he's always told me the truth. I know that he lived. I know that he died. I know that he was buried. And I know that he was resurrected. And I know that he went to heaven. And I know he's coming back for me, because he said he would. And he's coming back to take all of us. The Father of light is coming back to take all of us, because Christ shines, the light of the world, for all people, for all time. Anyone can come to him, and there will be no more darkness. And I am awestruck that he would do that for me. And only another sinner who's been saved from hell by grace can know how hard it is to comprehend that. But he said he's coming back. And he said for us to get ready. And I want to be ready. So get ready, because he's coming. Get ready. And when he comes, we're going to go. And we're going to live with the Father of light. So get ready. Get ready.